At 4 in the morning, many people start their workday by skipping their train fares, not out of irresponsibility, but because their wages are not enough to buy them a legal seat. They have jobs, they have schedules, and they still sleep at the train station. And that is only a small part of the bigger picture. In cities once considered models of Europe, there are now areas of chaos where the police stand idly by. Streets that cannot be controlled, industries that are legal but cannot be regulated, and a welfare system that is crumbling from within. This is no longer a phenomenon. This is an everyday reality where crises are no longer in the future. Number 1. Darkness under city lights. In the heart of Berlin, less than 500 meters from the television tower, scores of people are huddled on the cold stone floor of Alexanderplatz station. This is not a seasonal anomaly. It is a scene that occurs every night year-round. Between 2019 and 2024, the number of homeless people in the capital will double, with estimates ranging from 10,000 to 15,000. Of those, more than 60% are foreigners, mainly from Eastern Europe and the Middle East. Görlitzer Park, once planned as a communal green space, is now known as a public gathering place for drug dealing and local gang disputes. Cottbusser Tor. A busy intersection in the heart of Kreuzberg is regularly put on special watch by the police. They can't fully control the situation and, in fact, don't have the resources to even try. The problem is not just the density of people living on the streets, but the mix of groups: addicts, the mentally disabled, marginalized migrant workers, and those who simply can no longer afford a room in a city where rents have increased by an average of 51% in 8 years. Between 7 p.m. and midnight, the S-bahn and U-bahn trains become shelters. Each compartment is a makeshift room. Some people use newspapers to line their backs. Others carry garbage bags containing all their belongings. Other passengers, mostly locals or tourists, choose to stay quiet. This is not the case in the suburbs. Far from the city center, it happens right in the places marked as high security areas. Amid the traffic at Hermannplatz, a large shopping mall, there are increasingly scenes of people being left out of the social flow, lying silently next to supermarket doors, sleeping on bank steps, or standing silently for hours beneath giant LED billboards. By 2024, more than 30% of Berlin's homeless will have no access to formal assistance because they lack valid residency documents. Others will be denied access to shelters due to overcrowding, lack of security, or violence from their peers. In winter 2023, temperatures will drop to 7 degrees Celsius, but there will be only about 1,000 places in the city's cold weather shelter system. How did a system that is considered one of the most efficient in Europe allow this situation to persist? There is no single cause to blame. Rising living costs, an unbalanced welfare system, ill-prepared immigration policies, and rapid urbanization have created a multi-layered reality. One in which law enforcement agencies, social workers, and local governments are all struggling. As the city enters midnight, the lights from the buildings are still bright, but the modern urban system is not enough to hide the fact that thousands of people are living just below the safety line, gradually becoming invisible in their very existence. Number 2. Freedom of trade-off. Since 2002, Germany has legalized the adult services industry with the aim of taking this activity out of the legal gray area, giving participants health, labor, and financial protection. Currently, the number of participants in the regulated personal services sector is estimated to range from 150,000 to 400,000, concentrated mainly in large cities such as Berlin, Hamburg, and Cologne. In theory, the law allows them to register access insurance and labor rights. In reality, more than 80% of this activity takes place in an unregulated area. Licensed establishments account for less than 10% of all places where trading takes place. The rest take place in private apartments, temporary areas, or through online intermediary services. Health checks and monitoring have barely kept up. According to Ministry of Interior data, only about 7% of practitioners are formally registered as required by law. More than 60% of those involved in this activity come from Eastern European countries, especially Romania and Bulgaria. Many migrate to Germany through unclear labor brokerage relationships. Once there, most fall into financial housing and paperwork dependence, leaving them with no choice but to continue working under uncontrolled conditions. Authorities had hoped that the law would separate voluntary and coercive action. But on the ground, that line is almost impossible to draw. Once the registration is complete, the underlying personal status is no longer subject to further scrutiny. Instead of providing security, the legal system is shielding a model of openness, but not substance. Most buyers of services do not care about the origin of the seller. A 2023 survey found that more than 70% of customers do not know whether the person they are dealing with is legally registered, nor do they consider it their responsibility. One thing to note in Germany, there are no official limits on the number of professionals in an area. This has led to the emergence of spontaneous high-density service areas in cities like Berlin, where there are no signs, but locals know the function of each apartment. Around mid-2023, a proposal from lawmakers to limit operations to certain areas was quickly rejected by those concerned that pushing operations into hidden areas would make monitoring more difficult. In this context, a model that was supposed to empower is leaving participants with fewer and fewer opportunities to exit. The emergence of new forms, digital platforms, hourly services in small cities is increasing scale and fragmentation. At present, the legal system has created a regulatory safety zone, but it cannot guarantee the safety of those inside. Every policy is introduced to protect, but without strict enforcement and re-evaluation of its effectiveness, it can easily become a mere formality. In a legal framework that is considered progressive, what is it that makes them unable to stop? When looking at the map of the specific service sector in Germany, not all bright spots have real light. Number 3. The police. Also backed down, Frankfurt is one of Europe's largest financial centers, but right next to the city's central station is an area with one of the highest crime rates in Germany. The Bahnhofsviertel is only a few blocks wide, but within its less than a square kilometer, the rate of drug-related crimes, violence, and rape has been steadily increasing year after year. Although police patrol the area regularly, most of those who operate there know when and where they can avoid being stopped. In 2024, the German Interior Ministry counted more than 41,000 cases involving forced labor, human trafficking, and labor exploitation. These are only the officially recorded figures. In most cases, witnesses do not cooperate because they fear retaliation, lose their place of residence, or do not have the legal documents to work with the authorities. Not only are the police understaffed, they are also facing public pressure from multiple sides. On the one hand, communities are demanding increased policing of dangerous areas. On the other hand, civil society groups are opposed to the crackdowns, arguing that they cause panic and make it difficult for vulnerable people to access support services. In fact, many urban areas, such as Cottbusser, Tor Berlin, Hansaplatz Hamburg, or Gallusviertel Frankfurt, are maintaining a state of passive surveillance where the authorities are present but do not have the resources to intervene deeply. In the last 12 months, only about 14% of suspected cases related to illegal mining have been prosecuted. In major cities such as Berlin, Frankfurt, and Hamburg, many areas listed in public safety reports are where the police presence is not yet active. For example, in Frankfurt's Bahnhofsviertel, within a 1.2 kilometers radius, the rate of drug-related incidents, assaults, and organized crime is 4 times higher than the city average. Most large-scale criminal activity is no longer sporadic. Networks operate in closed models with internal links based on regions or family ties, using the rotation of people and routes to avoid surveillance. Nearly 3/4 of major criminal cases solved since 2021 have shown signs of being linked to transnational groups, mainly from Eastern Europe, the Western Balkans, and North Africa. Although Germany cooperates with Europol and Interpol in hundreds of joint operations each year, legal constraints and data inconsistencies slow down tracking. One specific example, the German and French crime alert systems are not updated in the same time frame, causing an average lag of 48 hours between alert and action, long enough for a suspect to leave the country. How proactive do you think they are? In the 2024 internal report of the Federal Police Association, the turnover rate increased by 11.2%. The reasons cited included excessive workload, high risk of direct collisions, and a sense of systemic helplessness when individual action fails to bring about meaningful change. In some high-risk neighborhoods, residents have taken the initiative to set up internal warning systems. Maps of unsafe areas are shared via text message groups. Self-organized patrol schedules and early warning signals are sent out among residents. While this model is meant to be self-protective human rights, watchdogs have warned that it could fuel xenophobia or unwarranted emotional reactions. On the other hand, many areas in Berlin and Duisburg have reported that petty crimes are being dealt with less frequently because police are being diverted to more serious cases. When there are not enough people to respond according to standard procedures, the only option left is to monitor, assess, and wait for the situation to escalate before intervening. In a modern system built on uniformity, the safety of a neighborhood depends on the number of people deployed and the ability to respond quickly, creating a difficult paradox. Order is not disappearing, but the line between control and detachment is becoming ever more blurred. Number 4. The invisible story of the homeless. By the end of 2024, it is estimated that more than 531,000 people in Germany will be without permanent housing. Of these, nearly 50,000 will be living outdoors or in temporary structures such as old cars, abandoned warehouses, or unfinished buildings. The rest will be dependent on shelters or temporary shelter from acquaintances. Although Germany's welfare system is considered one of the largest in Europe, access to it remains very low for this group. It is worth noting that nearly 40% of homeless people do not have permanent residency, meaning they cannot apply for housing benefits or health care. Cities such as Berlin, Hamburg, and Dortmund have the highest concentrations of homeless people, especially around central train stations, old commercial areas, and interregional bus stops. Between 2015 and 2023, a wave of migration from the Balkans and the Middle East significantly changed the composition of the homeless population. Many arrived in the hope of finding work or protection, but failed to pass the lengthy residency process or ended up in illegal employment and lost their place of residence altogether. In winter, temperatures in many northern regions can drop below 5 degrees Celsius, while shelters can provide only about 18,000 spaces. This forces some people to move constantly from night trains to bus stations or parks with remaining light. These shelters are rarely completely safe. Since 2022, many cities have increased their support budgets, but the current model remains temporary. Most centers only allow overnight stays and do not provide long-term solutions for employment, psychotherapy, or social orientation. A large proportion of people experiencing homelessness are unable to reintegrate due to the loss of all personal documents, lack of registered residential address, and long-term mental health problems. What is unique about Germany is that homelessness is not limited to middle-aged singles. Since 2021, the number of people under 30 who have become homeless has increased rapidly, accounting for around 22% of the total. Many of these people had been in vocational training or short-term work, but were pushed out of the market due to unaffordable living costs. At some central stations, residents and train operators have begun to develop unwritten rules to maintain order, such as assigning shifts for rest breaks or warnings about security checks. Those living outside the system have few options. They are no longer eligible for housing, nor are they able to participate in the formal labor market. In a country with the fourth highest GDP in the world, the sustainability of this phenomenon is no longer simply a matter of lack of funds. The government spends more than $6 billion a year on housing subsidies, but much of this money goes indirectly through rental schemes run by private property management companies. As a result, those in need of emergency accommodation are the ones with the least access. So how does a system designed to cover all classes leave hundreds of thousands of people without any records? Look no further. The answer may be right there on the cold stone steps of a crowded train station during rush hour. Number 5. Cracked system. Germany spends more than 150 billion euros a year on its social security system, which includes unemployment benefits, housing assistance, health insurance, and social services. However, access does not match the size of the budget. Complex allocation mechanisms, extensive documentation requirements, and lengthy approval processes mean that many people are left without benefits despite being eligible. Bürgergeld. The policy that will replace Hartz IV from 2023 is designed to be less punitive and more supportive of recovery. However, by the end of its first year, less than 12% of homeless people had access to the scheme. Most did not have a registered address, could not prove employment status, or did not qualify for long-term residency. In the housing sector, current social housing policies have only partially compensated for the loss of affordable housing due to the expiry of old subsidy contracts. Over the past 15 years, more than 3 million apartments that were once social housing have been sold to the private sector or have expired their subsidy period. Meanwhile, only about 25,000 new apartments of this type are built each year, far below the actual demand in major cities. Similarly, laws legalizing adult services were intended to help regulate the industry through labor regulations and health insurance. But in reality, less than 10% of workers are fully registered. Much of the activity takes place without health safety or contract inspections. Regulating brokering and trafficking networks is also severely limited by a lack of evidence and cooperation from exploited people. In the criminal justice sector, prosecutors in some states are instructed to prioritize cases of higher social value, resulting in many low-level offenses going unpunished. This creates a sense of impunity in communities where the law is not enforced evenly. One of the biggest gaps today is coordination between the federal, state, and municipal levels. Assistance programs often break down when beneficiaries move between states or change their residency status. Re-verification processes cause benefits to be suspended and people in need of assistance to have to start all over again. The procedural confusion and administrative hierarchy have the opposite effect. Instead of encouraging people to access the system, it drives them away from the official corridors. The important question is not just whether the policy exists, but how well it is enforced and who actually receives the protections it enshrines on paper. When a welfare system is carefully designed but inconsistently operated, its effectiveness comes not from the budget, but from how the policy reaches people at the edge of their ability to survive. Number 6. National image. Germany remains among the top 10 most popular destinations in Europe for international tourists. Nearly 40 million foreign visitors visit each year, with cities like Berlin, Munich, Hamburg, and Frankfurt the main destinations. However, not all experiences are as advertised in tourism campaigns. In Berlin, the area around the central station and major public places is often the scene of homeless people staying overnight or people using drugs in broad daylight. Although not causing serious disturbances, the presence over time changes the impression of the city, especially for first-time visitors. In Frankfurt, the Bahnhofsviertel area, just a few hundred meters from the Congress Center, has been listed in local security reports as the city's most crime-prone area for 3 consecutive years. How cities handle controversial areas is often situational. Before major international events or summits, some areas are temporarily cleared patrolled and access restricted. However, once the event is over, the original conditions quickly return. Amidst cultural campaigns, social issues are rarely mentioned. Photo series videos and media materials focus on festivals, architecture museums, and shopping streets. They are a real part of Germany, but not the whole. Amid the plethora of travel options in the Schengen area, authenticity is increasingly important. A city is judged not only by its beauty, but also by how it handles its imperfections. When the image and the reality are so far apart, the question becomes not about right or wrong, but about priorities to keep up the good looks to attract visitors or to face what is inside. In a competitive global tourism landscape, what makes a place memorable is not its best features, but how it treats the rest of itself. Number 7. Crisis and protests. Rapid demographic change in major cities is fueling social tensions. Between 2015 and 2024, Germany welcomed more than 3 million new immigrants, including self-employed workers and asylum seekers. Despite integration programs being implemented at various levels, the uneven pace of adaptation has created areas of persistent tension, particularly in densely populated districts of Berlin, Leipzig, and Duisburg. In just a decade, the proportion of residents with immigrant backgrounds in many inner-city districts in Germany has surpassed 45%. Living in the same residential area, the languages spoken, the lifestyles, and the social values are sometimes completely different. When diversity exceeds a threshold without a strong enough support system to hold it together, the surrounding atmosphere begins to change, not suddenly, but clearly enough to be seen in the small details of everyday life. The question now is not why conflicts occur, but how much of them stem from small misunderstandings that have never been clarified. And in a neighborhood with the same zip code, are people living together or just coexisting? In such an environment, it is not shouts or slogans, but the quiet accumulation of inconveniences like a misunderstood look, a misinterpreted statement, that are more likely to trigger a lasting and uncontrollable reaction than any data-driven forecast. Number 8. A parallel Germany. In the same geographical space, 2 different realities coexist. One Germany is a destination for technology exhibitions, climate conferences, music festivals, and heritage architecture. The other Germany exists beneath that system, a place of overcrowded welfare corridors, neighborhoods labeled as surveillance, and tens of thousands of people not registered in any residency database. Statistics may show macroeconomic stability, but data on housing crime and welfare show widening gaps. Each city is trying to balance image with reality between the desire for growth and the limits of social governance. At this point, the question is whether those on the margins are still within the priority range of a system that has been operating for almost a full century. A nation cannot be judged by its growth rate alone. How it treats its own vulnerable is a measure of its maturity. And perhaps what is needed more than stopgap measures is the courage to face its own dark side. The story you've just followed is more than just a slice of a city or a policy. It's a close-up look at what's going on behind the scenes in a modern society where the gap between ideals and reality is no longer uncommon. If you believe topics like this deserve serious attention and wider awareness, support NVL Travel Documentary by liking, sharing the video, and subscribing to the channel so you won't miss the next hidden layers we're uncovering. We always want to hear your perspective. Leave a comment below, and let's discuss what's not being said enough. See you on the next journey.